The big news from the day appears to be the position change for one Sonny Styles, of course, former 5-star, and you guys have speculated about that the entire offseason. Tony, we'll kick it back to you to get us started on this one. But when you arrive at 6'4", 235 and look like a linebacker, and obviously the game has changed in so many ways, but that's been one of the big questions of the offseason. What do we do with this guy to maximize that enormous talent?
Yeah, and that was the first thing I was looking for when I walked into practice. I was looking for the position groups and looking for the linebackers, and then I saw him over there. And I mean, we got the rosters before practice, and it said 6'4", 235, and it's like, well, if he's getting bigger, he's not going to be, he's going to be moving down in terms of the position. And so, he was repping, I think, with the 2s at the will behind CJ Hicks, and your first practice at that position, you're probably going to be behind some guys, and it'll be an interesting competition to watch between those two. And I don't know that you necessarily need one winner over the other, because they both have some versatility that they can do different things. And Ryan Day did say, yeah, Sonny, you're going to see him at linebacker, but you're also going to see him some other places as well this season. So last year, Jim Knowles was using spring to experiment on what they can do with Sonny. This year, they'll be using spring to experiment on what they can do with Sonny. And with that kind of versatility and his ability, there's a lot that you can do. But eventually, you've got to figure out what you're going to do. You've got to know what you're going to do so that he can do it. You can't just keep experimenting. Eventually, you got to put all of this into place and get it done. And I don't think there's any concerns there. But yeah, that's I think that is the only big position move that we've seen. And again, this was kind of expected.
Yeah, I agree with Tony that one of the first things I was looking for is where Sonny was at. And you go through the roster and you look for number changes. And then once you go through, jersey number changes, you start looking at position changes and heights and weights and differences there. And I certainly can remember going through the years of maintaining rosters at a previous stop of where a guy goes from 6'2" to 6'3" to 6'2" to 6'3" over his 4 years. I guess it just depends on who's measuring that specific year. But, it'll be interesting to see what Sonny at linebacker means. What does that end up meaning for somebody like CJ Hicks? Because, I mean, do you, as spring goes on and you're in the laboratory and you're experimenting, do you try sliding him down into like a stand-up rush end? I mean, what do you do at that point? I mean, we're one practice in, and now we suddenly, we've got all of these ideas, all these things that we want to see them do. And, thankfully we're back at practice tomorrow, but we're going to see, as Steve said, stretching and punt and some things like that. So we're not going to know much until we know anything. And just for anybody expecting to really see behind the curtain at the spring game, we're not going to see behind the curtain at that point. Maybe they do try a couple things out. Maybe you put some things that weren't as successful out there, because all your opponents are going to watch your spring game or whatever, just to put something on tape, just so it's something in the back of their mind. I mean, I'm much more willing to put that type of stuff out there than the stuff I'm willing to use. I would rather keep that under wraps until it is time to debut it.
Yeah, Sonny, I'll just throw in, the key to him, and I've said this since he was a sophomore in high school at Pickerington Central, when you're that big, that strong, you need to be close to the line of scrimmage. That way you can impact more plays. In high school, he probably was only involved in about 15% of the plays. Just didn't have the kind of impact that you would think somebody of that immense athletic ability would have. And it's not a fault of his. He was stationed 15 yards off the ball. And if they went to the other side or went underneath, it didn't involve him. So he was only involved if a running play got out the gate or if somebody tried to throw down the middle of the field in his direction. And that was it. And I for the longest time, I just thought he was miscast. And I think they won the state championship his sophomore year with he and his brother. And I don't think they won it either of his last 2 years. And I think part of that was because he was just out of position. In fact, I know they didn't win it the last 2 years. They lost to St. X's junior year. and then lost to Upper Arlington in the regional finals his senior year, I believe. So I just, and obviously he played a little bit, as an early enrolling freshman. He reclassified, and so he really wasn't pressed into service. But last year he played quite a bit at safety. He did reasonably well, but then you see in the bowl game he gets victimized on some quarterback run, sucked inside, didn't play as contained like he was supposed to, etc. And you're just kind of like, what do we have here? And so he is going to get the opportunity to learn linebacker this spring. And I don't know if it was him or somebody else. All they're doing is lining up yesterday. They lined up 11 on 11. They took a snap and everybody took 3 steps. There's no football involved. It was just, there was a football on the field, but it was just snapped. And then everybody took 3 steps. And I could just hear Jim Knowles in the background just bellowing, "B gap, B gap." Somebody on just the most rudimentary thing that you could possibly do as a defensive player didn't know where they were supposed to be. And he's back there screaming. I don't think it was Sonny. It could have been anybody. But that's just an example that it's just not as simple as, okay, he's 6'4", he's 235 pounds, he's got great athletic ability. This is a can't miss situation. He's going to be an All-American. Well, if he doesn't trigger and he doesn't make plays, he's not an All-American, and they don't win the national championship. So, and I don't want to pin it entirely on him, but you get what I'm saying. It's like, it's just not because of A, you're going to have result B. It just doesn't work like that. He's got to go in there and learn the position as if it's brand new, and it's going to be a tough one. But we'll see how he comes out the other side.
It's all about buy-in, and you got to have multiple parties all buying in on a position change or things like that. The coaches have to want it, the player has to want it, and the family has to want it. And if one part of that isn't there, then it's not going to work. And it seems like everything has aligned at this point, and we can sit there and say that spring is an experiment or not, but spoiler alert, this is a real position change. And I think that it's going to be for the betterment of the team. It's going to be for the betterment of Sonny. I don't see any losers in this situation except for maybe CJ Hicks, who appeared to be the heir apparent to that vacant linebacker position. If Sonny locks it down out there with Cody Simon, then how do you get CJ Hicks out there as, he sits another year and is kind of, hitting that glass ceiling. And we know that Ryan Day said prior to spring practice, we want to play more players. It's going to be a long season, et cetera, et cetera. I also want to sit there and eat my vegetables and take my vitamins. It doesn't mean I'm doing it. It sounds good in theory. In actual execution, when life is going on, it doesn't necessarily happen. I'm going to sit there and drink beer and fall asleep on the sofa. So I just don't. I'll believe some of this when I see it, but the Sonny move is real. It's something that had been percolating in the shadows for a while, and it was good that they just rolled it out here for everybody to see day one. And they didn't do some cloak and dagger thing of where for the first 4 periods of spring practice, he was back there with the safeties, usher the media out, and now we can go forward and let's, keep everybody, talking about it and make it a giant distraction. Not as much of a distraction as Arch Manning being in NC2A football 2025, but don't get me started on that one.
We'll come back to that.
Follow my hand. Everything I care about that. You see it right there. I have a life. Don't care about NCAA football 24, 25, 28, 13, 17.
Go to bed, old man.
No F's to give on that.
Too, Steve.
Okay,
bed,
boomers.
But Steve, Kevin, if you want another platform, hey, we'll give you your 5 minutes or whatever you want.
Before we move to that, I will say James Laurinaitis talked when we talked to him when he got the job fully a couple weeks ago, said he should have played Cody Simon more. So at least he has that experience of I should have done something. And now this year I have an opportunity. Like if CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles both earn the playing time, he can look back on last year's and say, I should I know I should have done it last year. I have an opportunity to do it this year, but like Kevin said, when a game is going on and it's still a 7-point game, like coaches are so reticent to go ahead and put somebody else in. They need their best players because they can lose a game on any moment. So I think you've just got to make sure your guys are good enough and that you can trust them. And he talked about rolling guys like Brian Hartline does. And it's different with receivers because if a linebacker runs 70 yards or 50 yards, they're probably going to sit out that next snap anyway. Like receivers are doing this. Linebackers, they don't necessarily have to run that much and then come out. So you kind of just have to find time to bring guys out. And Cody Simon, I think they had a good mix there towards the end of the season. The second half of the season, he would come in for Steel Chambers. And of course, Tommy Eichenberg gets hurt. So he steps in there. I think there's a way to do it without requiring an injury to get it done. And some of that may be the jack position again, if they want to ever bring that back, because I think both of those guys would be good candidates for that, for what it's supposed to do. So I think there's enough snaps. And if it's over the course of 16 games, even if there's only 25 snaps in one game, eventually you're going to be playing a bunch at some point. So they should be okay with it. And Sonny's a guy who has been substituted out already in his career and has been started 12 games last year, but would come out on passing downs when he was at nickel. CJ Hicks has never played, so I'm sure he'd be happy to get half of the snaps at will,
Well, like you guys say, and Kevin said most notably, people want information, people demand information, and it's one day of practice, and it's just going to take a while, and you guys are only subject to so much. Although I would expect that all of you guys had your stopwatches ready for those 3-step takes off the line of scrimmage to let us know, who's getting off that ball quick.
I can eyeball it. I'm okay.
Oh.
I was just happy where they put the quarterbacks. That's maybe burying the lead there. Normally they put the quarterbacks out in Gahanna, and we can't see them. They're so far away from us. They were front and center for us. So, for whatever reason, being practice one, they had them right there. We got to see Aaron Noland throw on some wheel routes, against air, but not literally against air, but, against oxygen. And, that was nice. So we're getting to see the bits and pieces, but we're certainly, it's a very incomplete data at this point. And, that's what I look forward to spring and having to kind of, dig around and try and make some conclusions. And what I mean to do every year is make my spring conclusions, and then after the end of the season, go and see how many of them I was right on. And I don't know what a good percentage would be. 50%, 80%. I mean, are we talking about baseball where if you're 3 out of 10 that you're a Hall of Famer, or are we talking about a situation of where it's like shooting free throws? And if you're under 85%, I mean, get your butt back in the gym.
All depends on how much of a limb you want to go out on. If you just want to tell us that Travion Henderson looks good and I think he's going to have a nice season, well, okay, you're gonna hit 80%.
That's the kind of stuff Tony does.
Well, hey, I'll tell you
the mildest of bold predictions, Tony Gurley.
No, come on. I will say Travion Henderson down 4 pounds from last year, so he's going to be faster, no doubt.
Faster. Well, last year I was impressed because he was lowering his shoulder and became a muscle runner, a power back.
He looked like he had great burst yesterday. Obviously no pads on and no contact, but they were working on taking handoffs and accelerating, and he looked like he was accelerating at a high rate of speed. I reflect back last week, we're at the combine, and at least 2 different players mentioned him as a guy that they played against who they respected and, ability. Notre Dame was one of them, one of their players, and either a Penn State or a Michigan player also mentioned him. So, he got some props from folks at the combine last week, and including from Mayan Williams, who said he expected Travion Henderson to be there with him. Travion on Monday told a story about how he was at church during the bowl trip, if this sounds right, and with G. Scott, and he had an epiphany, I guess, at some point in there, and said, "I'm coming back to Ohio State." So, and he told G. Scott right on that spot. So, yeah, that was kind of an interesting human interesty type story that, he thinks he's got more. He's not threatened by Quinshon Judkins, who looked great yesterday as well, being there, and says it's a good situation. So that was amazing. That was the very first question that Henderson got the other day was, what do you think about being part of a tandem? And he's like, hey, I'm good with it. So, for a guy that missed 3 games last year because, whatever happened in the Notre Dame game, I think he realizes that, to take 25 carries a game ain't all it's cracked up to be sometimes. So, if he can split the load, maybe they'll both get to the finish line. And again, maybe they'll win the national championship. I know long way to go between now and then.
Well, and Travion Henderson's never had a problem with sharing load. It's just so much of the careers of Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson, it's rare that they were both healthy in the same game.
Yeah.
So whether Henderson would miss games or Williams would miss games, remember he came into the class with Evan Pryor. Evan Pryor was committed before Henderson. And so he was completely okay with that. So it doesn't shock me that he is still okay with that. And it certainly doesn't shock me that Quinshon Judkins is I don't need to carry the ball 30 times a game anymore. I'm good, letting somebody else help me out. And Henderson was repping first, and Judkins was repping second, and then Dallin Hayden, and then James Peoples, and then Sam Williams-Dixon when we saw them. Steve, you mentioned David Boston as a junior last year. I do remember David Boston coming in at 6'3", 205. He was listed like that as a sophomore as well, because I just looked. As a junior, David Boston, 6'3", 215. As a true freshman, Jeremiah Smith, 6'3", 215.
Yep.
So,
very similar. Very similar. And he just looked the part. I mean, what can you say? And again, when you put shoulder pads on, full pads on, it's going to be playing actual football. And we'll see how some of these freshmen do. I don't think they want to just drop them into the deep end of the pool and see if they can sink or swim. But we saw last spring, you were already getting a sense with guys like, some of those guys, those early enrolling freshmen that really could make plays. So I guess we'll see as this spring wears on. I mean, we're going to get to watch a full practice, it sounds like, at the end of March. And maybe, I don't know, is that 2 or 3 weeks from this Saturday? They're having, I presume, the open practice for the students 2 weeks before the spring game. And we'll be able to check that out. So, looking forward to that.
What did David Boston weigh when he was with the Chargers in that one picture when he had the
like 230 probably?
I was going to say it was more than 215, but to make a final point on the running backs, Ohio State's running back room isn't as deep in some regards as it's been in previous years. I mean, it's very top heavy with Henderson and Judkins. Dallin Hayden, much to the chagrin of everybody, has not had as much run as people would like to see. And then you've got two true freshmen. So you have these top 2 backs, and if they, in any combination total 30 carries between them, and then everything else kind of goes beyond, but it's a lot of football to be played. And Travion Henderson, certainly in being very physical and everything else, has been dinged up at various points of his career. So Ohio State absolutely needed to make a move like that. I mean, did the addition of Quinshon Judkins in the equation really kind of have Chip Trayanum move to Kentucky? I mean, I think Ohio State needed somebody who was a little bit more of a every down productive back then, and that's not taking anything away from Chip, but Chip was kind of third fiddle to Trey and to Mayan, because once you get past the top 2, you get to Dallin, who seems to have a lot of talent, and then you got 2 true freshmen who don't know what they don't know.
There is possibly your number 1 transfer portal candidate after the spring. How much interest would there be in Dallin Hayden?
How bad would it hurt Ohio State if it lost Dallin Hayden?
All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. These three get together with me each and every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, so we appreciate them taking time out of their busy schedule. Let's hit a super chat. We've got one particular topic there that's been brought up as well in the chat we will hit on, and of course, we want to hear from Kevin concerning this EA Sports fiasco. Yakov, what you got for us? We've got... Key to a championship is roster full of third-round juniors.
Well, I think I don't know if that's in JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, probably have better prospects than that, but there is something to that because you've got Michigan being full of like 5th round, 6th round, 4th round seniors and taking that to a title. But again, I think it's important to note that last year was arguably the worst collection of great teams, of the best teams that we've seen in quite some time. And so, yes, it is a completely invalid championship. I think we would all agree with that. But there's definitely the veterans that Ohio State has, and whether they're second, third day, first day, they just, as Ryan Day said, you just don't want to waste it. You want to do all of the things that doesn't require talent to make that talent even better.
Kevin, go ahead. Or
What's that, Steve?
I didn't know if Kevin had anything to add to that. I was just going to say, it's kind of dismissing some of those guys. I mean, yeah, they might be third round picks or middle round picks, some of them who came back, but as of today, but they can play their way up, with a good senior year. There's a lot of them. I mean, I don't think Denzel Burke by any stretch of the imagination is a third round pick. There's a lot of guys there that can work their way up with a great year in 2024, and they're all going to be, they're all going to be highlighted to that point. So I look forward to it this fall, just to see how these guys. It sounds like, and this was what Ryan Day said, it's the most professional locker room outside of the NFL that he's ever been a part of. And I think that's going to go a long way toward what this team's ultimate destiny is going to be.
Yeah, you bring in kids every year. I mean, that's just how college football works. But when you have such a strong core of players who've been to the fair and seen the bear and everything else, and the stuff isn't necessarily new to them, and understand what it's like to be in high leverage situations and everything else. I mean, you bring your kids along faster because the coaches get so much time with them, but you're with, peer leadership means so much, and who it is that you buddy up with, and everybody has kind of like a little brother. I mean, it's kind of like a fraternity, big brother, little brother. And when you have guys that don't know what they're doing as a big brother, and it's like, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I mean, I was going to ask you, but when you have guys who do know what they're doing, I think that it just really creates a strong locker room culture. And I think that this is going to be a team. We've seen Ohio State kind of dip down in the number of captains that it's had. This year, it's either going to be the most competitive captain race we've ever seen, or we're going to see the number multiplied by a factor of 2 or 3.